what happened last night in the
Yes.
U.S. Senate, and give us the latest update.
So the Senate passed and the president signed new legislation that changes the requirements on employers for paid sick leave and Family Medical Leave Act requirements. So so that's what I wanted to get into, and you can, again, on our website, we've got a lot of details that you can refer to. But this applies to all employers with 500 and fewer employees. And there's a provision that gives the Department of Labor the ability to exempt 50 and under, but we know nothing yet about the criteria for exemption. So I want everybody watching this to assume at this point that you have to comply, because the criteria for being exempt is very, very unclear until the Department of Labor comes out with guidance. So first, paid sick leave, 80 hours, which is required to be paid regardless of length of employment. So if you hired somebody yesterday, that person is in the mix for the paid sick leave part of the requirements. 80 hours of paid sick leave. This applies to anybody who has been affected or is experiencing symptoms and seeking medical treatment. It applies to those that are under government quarantine or recommended by a health professional to be under self-quarantine. But and here's the one that affects more people than anything else: people who are caring for a son or daughter if their school or child care provider is unavailable due to this COVID-19 crisis. So that would be literally every parent in Michigan that has a school-age child, because the school is unavailable. For the paid sick leave, those are all the people that are covered under the new requirements. There are some limits on that: $511 per day and up to $5,110 for the paid sick leave part of it, for everything except for those who are staying home with their kids. That is limited to $200 a day, or a total of $2,000 over that 10-day work period. The Family Medical Leave Act, this applies to those parents who are staying home because their kids are out of school and their jobs cannot be done from a telecommuting standpoint. That is limited to $200 a day, up to $10,000 in aggregate. So it can be up to 12 weeks. So this is a substantial new benefit requirement. Of course, this part doesn't apply to the first 10 days because that's covered in the paid sick leave part. Okay, so really, if you add all this up, it is a very significant long-term requirement that has to be met. This one is only, the paid sick leave part is only for employees that have been in your employment for 30 days or more. I'm sorry, the Family Medical Leave Act, 30 days or more. So sick leave, all employees, even if you hired them today, they're covered. And the Family Medical Leave Act is just 30 days, those who have been there for 30 days or longer. This takes effect 15 days from yesterday. So the president signed it right away yesterday. 15 days from then, when these take effect, you will have to post a notice once the Department of Labor prepares it. We will provide that to you when that happens. We'll have it up on our website. All these requirements expire on December 31st, 2020, and unused time does not carry over into the next period. It just expires at that point. And there is a tax credit that is supposed to cover the cost, and this is the part we've really got to dig into more. It's calculated on a quarterly basis according to the legislation. It's calculated on a quarterly basis. You pay your quarterly taxes, you report what your expenses were, and you get a refund back. Now, that's what the legislation says. The Secretary of the Treasury yesterday went way in order to cover these costs, so you don't have to cash flow it, the new benefit. Now, how they're going to do this is really kind of an enigma. I've been on the phone with Senate and congressional offices over the last 24 hours trying to get to the bottom of this. The truth is we don't know. In fact, really the going theory is that the answer to that question will be answered or will be provided in the next round of federal legislation that comes out. So in other words, the Treasury Secretary was saying, we're going to front the money so you don't have to cash flow it for 90 days. But that apparently is somehow going to be fleshed out in future legislation.
So all that we really know right now is that starting in 15 days, employers will be required to give 2 weeks of sick leave, paid sick leave, and then up to 12 weeks after that of family medical leave paid.
Yes. So one thing I forgot to mention, the sick leave is 100% for those who are sick, who are quarantined, and so forth. So it's 100% of their pay up to $511 a day. For the Family Medical Leave Act and those who are home to care for their kids, it is limited to 2/3 of their income, no more than $200 a day. So there are different requirements, whether the reason that a person is home. If it's to care for their child, it's limited more than if it's paid sick leave that is for the first 2 weeks.
All right. And we've been having a discussion about how much of that will be reimbursed, and the legislation says 100% of it will be reimbursed up to those limits through a tax credit, and that is what we're still trying to sort out. This is brand new, obviously, to our members. I think there are a lot of small business owners out there who will not see this coming, and it is a fundamental shift in the way we interact with employees, at least for a while. When does this expire? When does it run out?
December 31st, 2020. So at the end of this year, this automatically repeals or it expires. But the part that we really need to stay on top of is how that reimbursement mechanism happens. How can we make it happen faster than when you file your quarterly taxes? Because there aren't too many businesses out there, especially with the crisis that we're facing, that are going to be able to provide this benefit and stay open and cash flow it all the way through to whenever they get their refund back. So stay tuned.
Not to mention filling those positions in the short term. That's an additional cost. I mean, this has some real implications to small businesses. And
that's the other thing. It's not like you can just go out there in the street and hire specialized positions. So when the idea that you're getting a rebate or a refundable tax credit to cover the costs, that's nice, but it doesn't mean that you're able to replace the workforce.
So I think it's fair to say we don't like this. We didn't really support it in its current. But it's intended to do something on an emergency basis. So Brian, you said all along we're not weighing in on the public health side of this. But what we do know is how this is going to affect small business, and this is not going to be easy to comply with. We'll continue to give you resources and information about how to do this. One of the things that actually, maybe even ironically, may be helpful is one of the first things that happened is the president talked about the SBA and some resources available through the SBA. There's been talk about pushing some money into the states through the SBA. Lori Berman on our staff, our Vice President of Membership and Development, has been sort of bird dogging that one for us. Lori, can you bring us up to speed? Some things happened even as late as this afternoon.
Yes, thank you, Rob. In the last hour, Michigan does show up as one of the approved economic injury disaster locations. So all counties in the state of Michigan are now eligible, business owners are eligible to apply for the economic injury disaster loans. You can find a link for those loans on our website. You can also find them at disasterloan.sba.gov/ELA. The site's pretty slow. There's a lot of people on it right now. Our advice is that you take a holistic approach, and that as you assess your finances, perhaps reach out to your current lender and look at your opportunities here. We have information on the site, all of the forms that you need, everything is there for you to take a look at. There are 800 numbers to call for the SBA. The Michigan Small Business Development Center has consultants that are here to assist you. These loans that are available are for the small businesses in all counties of Michigan, and it's businesses that are suffering a capital work loss due to the COVID disaster. That must be the main reason that you're applying for that. You also need to have a credit history acceptable to the SBA and the ability to repay that SBA loan.
That's an excellent point, Lori. So I just want to underscore that we're talking about loans here. We're not talking about grants, so they have to be paid back. and there are underwriting standards. So I used to be a banker. I used to make loans. Actually, I used to make SBA loans many years ago. And so I would encourage you to think about this in terms of when your business was running as normal, would you have been able to afford the loan that you're asking for now? If the answer to that is no, then it's going to be hard to meet the underwriting standards. And also, if you were unable to make your payments before all of this started with whatever your obligations are, then the chances are the underwriting standards are going to be a hurdle. So just keep in mind that that this is not, it's not because there's a disaster you're going to get this. In fact, a lot of the same types of underwriting standards will exist, but what the SBA does provide are more extended terms than what normal bank financing can provide. Like, for example, no payments for the first 4 months.
Right.
And that's something that a bank would normally do, and an SBA loan could. The longer terms, all the way out to maybe even 30 years. So you can stretch out amortizations for a very long time with these, but there will be underwriting standards, and that means, unfortunately, not everyone will be approved.
I think what we've heard so far is that in some of the states that got a little bit ahead of us, that as many as 50% did not qualify.
Yeah, the first round coming through, there were a lot apparently in other states that did not qualify for the SBA loan. So, so really think about this in terms of when everything returns to normal, do your financial statements show that you would have been able to make the payments on this? That's going to be an important point.
All right.
Those are
Thank
great
you, Lori.
points. Thank you. Yep.
And more information on our website. So we'll continue to keep pushing that out. But the latest is Michigan's in business for SBA lending. Specific to this coronavirus. Let's switch to the state a little bit. Also, a lot of action going on at the state. We got some guidance yesterday from the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity about how to almost advice or strategy.
Yeah, so we had from the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, they send out, it's kind of an infographic that has a decision, a set of potential decisions you can make as you're considering the really tough and awful decisions of laying people off. And so there are different options. They're not all the same. There's leaves of absence. There's, of course, there are layoffs. There's work share programs that are available, and there are different ramifications for each. The department, in fact, I gave them some feedback. I took some time to send an email to let the director there know that they did a great job in putting that together. I would encourage you to take a look at it on our website and run through it and consider all of the options before you make a decision, because there's a good chance that when the federal government comes through with a rescue package, and I think there will be something that comes through, that it's going to be to support current payroll. It's one of the things that a lot of the political people are talking about right now. They're not going to send out money just so that people can have cash on hand. It's going to be to make payroll. So how you classify people as you scale things down is going to make a difference.
Yeah. Okay. Also today, the Michigan Strategic Fund Board met. They created something called the Michigan Small Business Relief Program. Micah Babcock, who's our Director of Government Affairs, had ears in that meeting. And Micah, tell us what you know about this new program.
Yeah, so just this morning, the Michigan Strategic Fund called an emergency meeting to discuss establishing Michigan's Small Business Relief Program. So they actually approved two specific programs this morning. The first one is a $10 million grant funding program for local economic development organizations to provide grants of up to $10,000 for small businesses. In order to qualify for those, you must be an industry that's specifically outlined, though, within the Executive Order 2020-9. So that includes bars, restaurants, gymnasiums, and things like that. You must also have less than 50 employees, and you must also be able to show that you have a need for working capital right now, and that's payroll, rent, utilities, and other mandatory expenses. The second program they approved this morning was $10 million in low-interest business loans from between $50,000 to $200,000. In order to qualify for those loans, you must be in an industry as well that's specifically impacted by that Executive Order 2020-9, have fewer than 100 employees, Also need the working capital for payroll, rent, utilities, and other mandatory expenses. And the last one on the loans there is that you're able to demonstrate that you are unable to get access to credit through alternative sources. And as I mentioned, these this morning were approved by the Michigan Strategic Fund and are expected to be available on or before April 1st. And once we get more specifics, we'll be sure to release those to the general membership via social media and our website.
So Micah, total dollars, $20 million?
Correct, $20 million.
And 10 of that is in grants, as you described them, and 10 in loans. Is that correct?
Correct. 10 million in grants for people with under 50 employees, and then 10 million in loans for those of 100 and under employees. And they anticipated this morning that this would help benefit about 1,100 businesses across our state.
So actually, if we could then, Micah, we've been trying to get our hands on how many businesses were subject to the closure orders for a while, and that was revealed this morning. So this program could help maybe up to 1,100 or so businesses, given the dollar amounts that have been allocated. How many businesses were affected just by the closure orders?
From that executive order 2020-9, what we heard this morning was about 117,000 businesses.
117,000 total companies required to close down in the state of Michigan.
Yeah, either to close down or scale back. So that gives you a sense that this is a it's a fairly modest start, right? So it is a start. So that's good. Scaling up and creating, I can tell you because I've worked in state government, that there isn't a mechanism yet to process claims like this. So it is going to require for something brand new to be stood up, and to do it by April 1st is a big endeavor. But we have suggested that same fund, the strategic fund, instead of 20 million, they need to start with 100 million, and that's just the start. And we had also suggested that it really look at the business interruption cost as a total. So in this case, rather than predetermining $10,000 or predetermining for grants or predetermining a range of sizes for small business loans, to really look at the difference between the activity before and the activity now, and use that to inform what the need is. So we've got a proposal that we have put on the table, that SBAM has put on the table for them to consider. The fact that they approved this today, while it is very modest in terms of its overall scope, it does show a willingness to go in this direction. So we're going to keep on this.
While we're at the state, I want to at least mention lots of questions on the issue of does the negative experience in unemployment insurance come back on my company if I am not affected by the executive order? So I haven't been required to shut down or scale back, but I'm still affected. I think the answer at this point is it will come back as negative experience in your unemployment insurance.
Yes, as things stand today, yes, it will. So if you're one of the businesses that was required to close down or required to scale back, any employee laid off as a result of that does not count against your unemployment experience ratings for the future. For everybody else who might be shutting down and scaling back because just business has stopped, that will be counted just like it would have if it happened a year ago or a month ago or something. So that's how things stand today. We here at SBAM are advocating for, in fact, I was talking to a government official yet this morning who suggested that they were actively considering expanding that treatment to more businesses, maybe all businesses. So some good progress there. We will stay on this because while the order required some closures, just the overall crisis has de facto required more closures. And so we really think that everybody ought to be treated the same here.
And I think the point here, and we have demonstrated it here in a couple of ways, is we're not just reporting what's happening to you, we're actively involved in these conversations and actively advocating on behalf of small business as it's happening, because it's so important to get it right. So Mike is doing that. Thank you, Micah, and Brian is doing that. And it's really an important element of this whole thing. Let me switch gears a little bit. We've gotten a number of questions, and I want to try to address a couple of these. And then we mentioned interesting initiative yesterday with Meyer. The question that has come up in several different ways is about a sole proprietor and whether they can file for unemployment or not. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. Let me try to give you a more succinct answer. The answer is no, unless the business owner has been considered an employee of his or her company and have reported and paid taxes on their paid wages. And two, they're looking for and available for work. Looking for and available for work outside of their own business. So the question always is, could a sole prop, could you sort of stay in business? And the belief is that's the disqualifier. You have to be available and looking for work, and likely going to Michigan Works to prove it. So hopefully we've added a little clarity to that. A second question that comes up in a variety of ways is because there's language about essential and non-essential businesses. I think the executive order about business closures use this language kind of loosely, that some businesses are essential and wouldn't be closed, others. Is there such thing as an essential and non-essential business and a definition in state law?
Yeah, there isn't. So this is truly uncharted territory. So if like mandatory closures go to, on a much wider scale, and they say only essential business operations can continue, you can easily imagine how many businesses truly are essential for just the meeting the necessities. Right. So, you know, our lights are on, right? It might be the first day of spring today, but we still need heat for this year. We still need electricity. So clearly that's an essential business. But how about like you're buying things at the store, the essentials there? So there's logistics and packaging that happens with respect, and a whole bunch of other services have around retail. So you might think in terms of essential, yeah, well, emergency service providers and hospitals, absolutely, those are essential. But there's a whole bunch of other things essential to our daily life that happen in private sector. It's really difficult to call that out in an explicit definition.
And for that reason, it hasn't been done in the state of Michigan through the law. So you know, this whole idea about could my business be considered non-essential? There is no such thing as we stand here today. What is likely to happen is if there would be more closings, they would be specifically called out in a future executive order.
Yeah, so I think what's more likely, and again, I'm somewhat speculating here, what is more likely than some sort of across the board, everybody closes unless you're essential. I think what's more likely is they simply expand the list of closures. So there's been some chatter about should barbershops still be opened, and should daycare centers still be open is another question as well. Those types of things on an industry by industry basis. I think it's a little more likely that there would be explicit industries told to close down rather than an across the board everybody has to.
It gets confused a little bit because we also use that term essential and non-essential for personnel, for people. And so we tend to think we're talking about medical workers or first responders. And that term is thrown around rather loosely, I think, at this point.
Yeah, and just yesterday, the governor had an executive order that is asking ISDs to stand up daycare centers for essential workers. And so, but they're talking about healthcare and first responders and police officers and employees such as that. And so that these types of terms are being used, and they're used in a lot of different ways. So it really is hard to nail down exactly what the potential overall outcomes could be.
I think that the real message for our members is don't expect there to be an order that says all non-essential companies have to close. That is not, there is no such definition, and so it's not likely to come in that way. Let me get to a couple of other things here. Lots of questions about unemployment insurance. And so tomorrow we're actually going to have somebody join us who probably will know the answers to that.
Yeah, we have invited, and at least tentatively, keep in mind in the crisis situation, cancellations can happen if an emergency arises. But Jeff Donofrio, who is the The director of the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity is going to join us as well. So he'll zoom into this, and we'll talk about a whole host of issues in terms of the response. He's the point person on the economic response to this. As you might imagine, that is an enormous job. Right. And in some ways, it's tougher because decisions are being made on a healthcare basis. And so now, and so Jeff's job is really tough in that he's got to respond to and try to mitigate and deal with the impacts of decisions that are not made with the economy in mind. And so it's a tough job. He's going to be here to talk with us and share some information and whatever is relevant at that time. Hard to say what we'll talk about tomorrow because so much changes, and we'll see what's on mind.
And likewise, I think the Family Medical Leave Act, the bill that passed last night, Families First, lots of questions around that, lots of questions that came in today, and so our commitment will be to bring somebody or some bodies here who will be able to answer those questions as people just sift through the law and begin to understand it.
Yeah, because I mean, just to name a few, we're keeping a list here. What about part-time employees on the paid leave and that? So, what about benefit coverage? Is it just salary, or how are benefits treated in this? And then also, it takes effect in 15 days. But if you go ahead and start, the requirement takes effect in 15 days. If you start offering this leave and paid sick time now, then does it still qualify for the tax credit in the future? Right. Those sorts of things we're trying to.
We don't know the answers yet. Yeah. Okay. I also mentioned yesterday, Scott Lyon, our senior vice president, talked about an outreach we got from Meyer. So let me give you a little bit more information about that outreach, and more information available on our website. Beginning this week, Meyer has seasonal job opportunities that extend up to 90 days. We've also expedited our hiring process in order to connect people with the work at a faster rate. With the work we're doing to serve our communities, we need people who will help us meet the demands of business. So they have immediate demand for employees on a temporary basis. But if you got people who you need to lay off, Meyer needs them. If someone you know is looking for work, please encourage them to apply at www.jobs.meyer.com/stores. Also on our website. So look for seasonal team members as the job heading.
And they need them statewide.
They do.
So they need them in the distribution centers, but also retail statewide. So it's one of those businesses, a little different than most of the businesses out there, that their activities are way up right now. And so they need to bring on people, and maybe it could be a good solution for when small business owners have to reduce the size of their employment to really connect them in this way.
Also, keep your questions coming to SBAM at sbam.org. What we're trying to do is make sure we answer them specifically, but also to gather them and bring maybe experts and others here as we continue these daily briefings. And again, our commitment is to bring you the latest. Just seems like such a fluid situation that this format will be helpful. You can go back and look at daily briefings from the last few days. We'll continue to put those on our website as well. So we've reached our 30 minute. I'm going to try to keep these at about 30 minutes apiece. So thank you for tuning in, and remember, wash your hands.
And don't touch your face. Good luck.
Thanks.